issue about living next to one. But
Right.
there is this inconsistency about this building and 25 years. So that is and the business argument you put forward just doesn't make sense to me. So anyway,
well,
so if you were today say that yes, we'll extend the lease to 99 years, all my concerns will be satisfied.
Right. I mean, the difficulty I have is I can't speak beyond the applicant without. If he was sat here, I could ask him a question, so to speak. Yeah, we're all obviously working remotely now. If that's a stipulation of the committee as a requirement for the consent, then of course he'd be amenable to, because he ultimately wants the planning consent to provide this community facility. But as I said, what we try to do is ensure that the site management plan reflects exactly what national legislation and the Institute of Cemeteries and Crematorium Management stipulate within their guidelines. So that's what we've provided, because that's the industry standard. So if that's the industry standard, we're trying to adhere to that to give people the comfort that it will operate in accordance with that. Obviously, if there's a Cheshire East requirement that exceeds that, then certainly that's something, as I said, that we'll consider. Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I mean, and the ICCM, by the way, is just an officer institute. It's primarily set up for training of officers, and I don't think it really has any mandate over the length of leases. Anyway, that's all I'd say. Thank you for your response.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Councillor Maron. You've raised a lot of points that are interesting there that many of us didn't know, but now we do. Cheshire East have got higher standards than many, perhaps. Councillor Davies, I know you've been waiting for quite some time. It's down to you now, so make sure your microphone's on. We can see you, but we can't hear you. So microphone.
Can you hear me?
Just about. Move a little closer to the...
Right. Well, I want to ask two questions. You're not having any burials, you're just having cremations. So it's got to go to a crematorium, and they nearly always have a service there, and they put the plaque in when they can. So they don't have to have a building there holding the stuff up. Who keeps this place tidy? Is that paid for by the owner out of the fees he gets?
Yes.
They're told it's 25 years, it won't be theirs anymore unless you pay some more. So you're never going to get that field clean and empty, go back to nature. To me, you don't need a building on that site at all. I'm speaking because there's a crematorium, not a crematorium, a burial ground in Bickerton that I'm chairman of. Nothing to do with the church. We've been through a lot of this, and we thought sometime it's going to be no burials, all cremations. That's the way it was going. It's changed round again now. It's the other way. We're going to look at land again. What are your answers to those?
Right, Mr. Adams, see if you can answer that one.
So what was the question? Is
who's going to keep it tidy?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's basically going to be a sinking fund set up where 20% of the pot sales income goes into the on-site management of the overall burial site that will last in perpetuity and as long as the 99-year lease or the 25-year lease endures, basically. That again, that's as recommended by the Valuation Office Agency Practice Guidance. So that's why the building is required, because I appreciate exactly what the other councillor said in terms of how the council's sites are managed, but I'd imagine they are undertaken probably by a contractor who drives onto site, does that site, maybe moves on to another, whereas certainly, you know, the owner and the operator will want to actually manage this single site themselves and keep those vehicles within that building. Given the nature of, you know, the northwest weather, I think it is prudent to have a building on site where people, you know, can actually meet and greet and have a chat about the loved one and so on and so forth, you know, and have a presence on site to give them the comfort that, you know, that site is going to be appropriately maintained and is going to be, you know, not subject to vandalism and or any other antisocial behaviour that can ensue. So, you know, that's why the building is there. Indeed, you know, that it's been put forward on other natural burial sites that we've been involved with, most recently in the South Lakeland area, which was a protected landscape surrounded by, you know, national parks and AONBs. So it is something we didn't feel that was out of the ordinary, really. And indeed, as I say, it has been done in the past. So it seemed a sensible proposition, certainly.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that concludes questions from councillors now. We've had a good session on that one. So we'll move over to you remain online, Mr. Adams.
Okay.
But turn your camera and
thank you.
Microphone off. Thank you for the answers. Very comprehensive. So we'll go over to the planning officer, Mr. Evans, to comment on issues that have been raised by the public speakers. And Stan, could you possibly, Stan, could you turn your camera off? Good. Well done, you could make a start and Stan will get, you've got your microphone off, but you just need your camera off now, Stan. Good, you've done that. And no doubt you can hear us still. So, Daniel, it's over to you.
Okay, so I think in terms of the main issues have largely been covered in the questions with the second speaker, really. Mr. Adams, in terms of the main issues, largely the issue is the suitability of the site for within the Green Gap and open countryside. Clearly, any impact from the development is going to be quite limited for the vast majority of the site. Headstones, as we've heard, are going to be recessed. If there are any, and there'll be additional tree planting if requested. So any impact upon the open countryside and Green Gap is actually from the building and the small car parking area. Clearly, officers have balanced it and advised an approval based on the planning balance exercise we've undertaken. But it's really a decision for members on how to proceed with the application. I don't think I've got anything other than to say. I think in terms of there was quite a lot of discussion about how the site's going to be managed, and there was quite a lot of questions on that. I don't think I've really got anything more to add on the application, so I'd be happy for it to enter the debate, Chairman.
Well, yes, but there are three questions, three councillors popped up in the chat box with questions. I assume they're questions for you.
Okay, fine. I'm happy to take those.
If you could take those. We'll start with Councillor Rhodes, then Councillor Gage, and then Councillor Marin. And if we could keep those questions relatively brief, and then we can move to the debate once Dan has answered the queries that you have now. Councillor Rhodes.
I'm just questioning about drainage. I think the person who was in opposition mentioned about flooding and the pond overflowing. I've checked the report. There's no real comments from our flood risk officer. I just wondered if there was any more detail. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of flood risk, there were a number of representations from firstly, we had comments from the Environment Agency, which you can see in the report. They've got no objection They did originally raise a few concerns, which a response was provided. I think there was a bit of confusion from the Environment Agency whether actual coffin burials will be taking place on the site. But there's no objection from the Environment Agency. There's no flood zone on the site in terms of the Environment Agency flood maps, and the council's actual own flood risk officer has actually been out on site, and he's actually got no objections subject to the imposition of planning conditions. So all I can advise is in terms of flood risk and drainage, we have consulted with three bodies: the Environment Agency, the council's flood risk manager, and also United Utilities, and all have raised no objection on drainage or flooding issues.
Oh, hang on. You're an attendee. You won't be able to share.
Councillor Bratherton, you're on screen, and if you could switch the...
Chairman, I've been locked out of the whole conversation for about 10 minutes. I've only just clicked back in, so I'll switch it off now.
Yes, that's fine. Fine. Okay. Right. I think you've answered Councillor Rhodes' questions.
Yeah, I think just finally, just to say, I know the flood risk officer has been out on site as well to have a look at the site, and he's got no objection. The pond is located to the northern corner of the site, but there's no objections from any of the consultees, Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Gage.
Hi, thanks, Dan. Just thinking about this 25-year lease situation, from a legislation point of view, once cremated ashes have been put in the ground, are there any legal limitations then on what that land can be used for that you're aware of at all?
Not that I'm aware of from a planning point of view, no. Clearly, it's still going to be have the appearance of it's still going to be Green Gap. It's still well, I assume Green Gap will exist in 25-year time. It's very hard to say because I don't know what planning policy or planning legislation will say about the use of the site in 25 years' time. Clearly, based on today's policies, if they were still in place, there clearly would be it would be development within the Green Gap, and you'd apply the relevant policy tests. And if there were for additional buildings, say for example housing, if that was your concern, it's in my view it's highly unlikely to be acceptable development within the Green Gap. But obviously we don't know what may be the position in the future.
And the fact that human remains have been in that soil doesn't change anything at all? Not
that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's not clearly we for example, we have had applications to convert churches to residential use in the past, which have sometimes do include small historic graveyards, but I'm not come across it being a something which precludes that a change of use, for example. But to be honest, I don't know the definite answers.
I'll do. Thanks, Dan. That's quite helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we can go now to Councillor Marin, and then we'll open the debate, I think, because we've had quite a bit of time on this so far. Councillor Marin.
Yeah, I've got three questions, I think, for the officer, if that's okay, Chair. And just to help Dan out, by the way, the ashes can be exhumed after the lease period with an application to the Ministry of Justice, who can grant permission for that. So, you know, those people that don't want to renew their lease, for example, the owner could apply for an application to exhume, and they could be given back. Not saying they're going to do that, but it is possible. So I've got a series of relatively quick ones, really. But if this proposal is approved today, that's put in front of us as is, so we're all assuming they're going to be the interment of cremated remains in biodegradable containers. Is this if this gets permission today, will the applicant be able to do full coffin burials without a further application?
Well, I don't think full burial. full coffin burials are included within the management plan, but for completeness, whether you wanted to attach a condition to say any burials on the site shall be for the interment of ashes only, just for completeness.
I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
And I say that on the basis of when you inter cremated remains, it's normally several days after the funeral. When you do when you're doing a full interment of a human body, it's immediately after the funeral, and so this whole discussion would have taken a completely different shape if we were talking about the interment of full bodies, because you could be talking about 50, 60, even 100 cars going down what is a very narrow path. So there ought to be a condition that says that it is restricted to the interment of ashes. Another question I've got, the report's summary suggests that there would be some minor harm from the building and maybe the parking areas. I'm less bothered about the parking areas, but from the building. So what would you have said if this wasn't going to be just offices, but it was going to be a domesticated building, but everything else would have been the same? Would you still be making the same, so in other words, as I said to the last speaker, if I wanted to buy this plot and build a nice house there and use it partly for domestic purposes as well as anything else for maintaining the site, and the rest of the site would be as it was, would you still have said that this should be permitted? So it's the residential bit I'm bothered about.
Yeah, in terms of Green Gap, if you wanted to build a new dwelling in the Green Gap, the current position is we would not support clearly there may be agricultural workers dwellings or affordable housing, what have you, but if it was just an open market dwelling in the Green Gap, generally it would be something we would resist. Clearly, in this case, the building is associated with the use of the site, so we're balancing the benefits against the harm, and that's what the decision maker will need to do.
Okay. The application is also about burial of cremated remains in biodegradable containers. Does that mean that would have to be the case going forward, or could the applicant shift to containers that do not biodegrade? And by that obviously, I also saw Councillor Flavel's comment in response to my question about the exhumation. You can exhume cremated remains even if they're not in a container, but it is not very easy and or not as straightforward as a container that does not degrade. So could there be a change of emphasis, so we move away from biodegradable to something that doesn't degrade, and would that be allowed under this permission?
I think the difficulty is, how you could always attach a condition, but the problem you're going to have is if somebody was buried in a non-biodegradable container, how you would enforce the condition, which is obviously the issue. But I don't know how, unless it's included within the management plan.
It makes change of use a bit harder, Dan, though, if we did enforce and put a condition that they must be biodegradable, because they will be much more difficult to get out of the ground. And I think everyone will be much more sensitive to a change of use if we know. But once if they're all in containers that don't degrade and it's dead easy to take them out, it's a much easier route to something else. So, I personally prefer a condition whereby they could only be biodegradable. I understand the point you're making about enforcement. That's not too difficult to enforce or to look at, but I'd feel it was a safer route.
So what you're suggesting is additional condition then that the burial should only take place in a biodegradable container.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And the very last point, and it's not really a question, well, it's slightly a question. On page 44, the bottom line says that visibility will be okay if somebody else's hedge is cut.
So if I was writing the last point down. What page?
Page 44, the very bottom line says visibility be okay if you cut somebody else's hedge. I don't know whether the other person wants to cut the hedge.
Right, it might be a question for Andrew, but I've got the.
Yeah, that's one for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I visited the site and I drove into the access and drove out, and it was when you're driving out and looking right, there was somebody's hedge grown into the footway. So it's grown into the public highway, which is blocking the view a bit. So they just need to cut it back so it's not on the footway.
And we've got the power to insist on that, have we?
We do, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Councillor Marin. Very interesting points you've raised there. I think really now we can go to the debate, and in the chat box, Councillor Flavelle has come up and she'd like to speak. So we're into open debate now, Councillor Flavelle. So would you like to open the debate?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to say at first that I was really pleased to see this application. I only mentioned, 2 or 3 weeks ago at a cabinet meeting how disappointed I am that we don't have natural or ecological burial sites in the borough. I'm really pleased to see this come forward, and I do think it's something we need. I am disappointed that there isn't the facility for coffin burial, but so I wonder if we could, as the agent said, have an area designated that could happen in the future, because I do think that's something that there is a high demand for. Councillor Marin's point about that meaning you'd have more people on the site, I think you could still restrict attendees to the interment of the coffin. It wouldn't necessarily mean that everybody at the funeral would then pitch up at the interment site. So I don't see that being a real barrier. But they are, and I thought the questions that the agent answered were really comprehensively answered, and the idea that it is going to be fairly wild looking with just and people can put trees up. I think it's a really great idea and something we need. So I'm maybe a bit early, but I definitely will be supporting this proposal with any conditions that we come up with throughout the debate.
Okay, well, we'll go. Thank you for that. We'll go to Councillor Marin now. He said normally he's the ward councillor. Are you the ward councillor, Councillor Marin? Anyway, you'd like to speak.
Yeah. Well, yes, I am actually.
Well, I'm sorry, she came up at.
It's fine, Chair. It's fine.
13:22, and you came up at 13:24. So I'd already asked her to start.
It's fine. I have to say I am troubled by this application. And I'll give you an example because I'm generally a supporter of these sort of things, and maybe of this one. I used to be councillor in Haslington, and there is Western Cemetery for those of you that are familiar with it, and that was there for some years. And some developers built a cul-de-sac, and those houses sold very quickly because they were right next to a cemetery where they could guarantee everything was going to be nice and quiet. So it's got a lot of advantages going for it. But I am still troubled by it because I am a supporter of these sort of things. What concerns me about this application is the building and its potential for future use. Now, this site had an approved application for a residential caravan in 1978, and there was an application for 3 detached dwellings, and that was refused on this site on January 2017. And members will recall a debate that took place just a few weeks ago about application 2015-54N, the Board of Fisheries site in Councillor Clowes's ward, which sought a change of use to allow a domestic occupation. And it's that conversation, if you like, which I still think is relevant to this application, even though it might be 25 years in advance. I think this is the main concern of the parish council as well. This site isn't going to have headstones. It's going to have some small natural stones, easily movable. It's going to have some very nice trees. You're going to have sheep that's grazing on it. It's got loads going for it. And you won't particularly notice that it is a burial site. Page 41, the second paragraph, says in reference to the building that it's mainly that the level of harm would be minor to the open space. But I suppose that's true, but I am worried about what's going to happen in 25 years' time. Because this building, which is 17 metres in length and 6 metres wide, it could easily be converted to a nice bungalow, I think, and you will be looking out not onto a traditional burial ground, you'll be looking out onto some sheep grazing over onto a field. You'd hardly notice the difference. On page 41, under the need for development, I think that's there's a misleading part when it says in particular there are no available sites locally that are not tied to a particular religion or faith. Well, that's not true of the council sites, for example. They are not tied to any religion. I'm not quite sure why the chart is there at all in this report, because that chart is about whole body burial capacity, and in the chart it also refers to Knutsford, and that's a Cheshire Eaststone site. However, I do agree with the last paragraph, which is supportive of page 42, that an ecological burial ground will complement traditional cemeteries and offers wider choice. Now, I think that bit is true. There is an argument about whether this is truly ecological, because you can imagine putting into the ground hundreds of cremated remains that stay there forever, are not a nutrient to the soil, they're not absorbed in anything, they're just cremated remains that stay there. So I'm not sure the word ecological is quite right. Well, on page 44, the report indicates that the site would accommodate 5,500 urn burial plots, so one a day. The site will be full within 25 years. The report says between 10 and 20 years. So the issue about what's bothering me is what happens to that building then. What happens if the businesses decide that they're not going to release any of the plots to renew any of those leases? And that's the worry. If this was an application without a building, I'd very happily vote for it. If this was an application with a building and 99-year leases, I would also vote for it. What I'm suspicious of, to be frank, is that this is a building that is going to be there operated as a building for site purposes for 25 years. And I am bothered about what's going to happen after that, because I think we're going to go back to the same discussion we had with the fisheries building. So if there were to be a condition added where the leases had to be 99-year leases or 80 years, but certainly more than 25, I would be a lot happier. So I'm just troubled by the building or by the lease period. Nothing else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Very good points. Now we'll move to Councillor Gage.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, broadly supportive of this. My main concern is basically what Councillor Marin has just spoken about. It's the size of the building and the potential for change of use. A lot of the stuff that's included in the building probably isn't actually needed to run this site. I do like the idea of the meeting space. I think that's quite a good idea, but that could be facilitated with some sort of sheltered construct, perhaps with 3 sides blocked off for the elements, etc. I'm supportive of this, but I cannot support it with looming question of the possible change of use of this building structure. So if that could be amended in any way, I can support and propose it, but as it currently stands, I think I'm minded to refuse.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Rhodes, we'll go to you now.
I just would like to get back to the actual application, because unfortunately none of us have got a crystal ball and predict what might happen in 25 years. I'd like to get back to an actual discussion about what this application is, and not about fears about what a building may or may not be changed into in 25 years. Thank you.
Quite right. Now we'll go to, it looks as though it's Councillor Councillor Marin. You put a posting up to speak, and then we'll go to Councillor Acker-Smith.
Well, I don't accept what Councillor Rhodes is saying, because I think this period is very relevant. I mean, I could put I could recruit this firm perhaps and ask buy a field and say I'd like to live in that field in 20 years time or whatever, or before if I could get there. This is my methodology. This is my route map to getting residential accommodation on this particular site. Fix it for me. So there is a relevance. However, if we were, perhaps the officer can tell us, can we put a condition on about the lease period, because that would help satisfy my concerns really. So if we could put something like a 60-year lease period, which I don't think, which is a lot less than the council offers, then I'd be a lot happy with that. So can we add that as a condition? Because at the moment, the building and the lease period is pivotal to the way I vote, and I don't know yet.
Well, we'll go back to the officer, I think, and ask that question, unless, Dan, you'd like a little bit more time to think about that, and we could go to another councillor while you're thinking. Dan?
Chairman, I just wanted to check what the management plan actually says about the lease, so I'm just trying to find it. So if you could go to the next speaker, that'd be great.
Well, yes, that's what I was asking. So we'll go to Councillor Acker-Smith, and then you study that thing about the lease. A condition with the lease is what Councillor Marin would like to see.
I'm trying to get my camera on. So. Okay. Yeah, so my question is, how long does it take for a body, or, when would they stop having these sort of burials? Because if the lease is to end after 25 years, do you stop putting them at, if you're going to bury somebody, you don't want to just bury them for a year and move them. And I think I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Marin and Gage, is that 25 years doesn't seem long enough to me. Most cemeteries are there for pretty much ever, I think. And also future use of the building. I don't even see a need for a building that large if they're not actually having burial services. So yeah, that is a real concern of mine as well, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think the applicant's agent said they needed the building not just for a meeting place, but also to keep the machinery for keeping the site clear, grass mowing machinery, etc., etc. That was my understanding of what he said. Dan, are you in a position to talk to us about this suggestion of an extended lease, or shall I go to another councillor?
Yeah, I've just found it, I think.
So I'll give you a little more time if you like.
No, I think I've just found in the management plan, it talks about the burial site and the burial plots will be managed and operated for a minimum of 25 years from the last burial taking place at the site. So from the last burial, which could be there'll be a requirement for it to be operated and managed for another further 25 years from my reading of that. But I appreciate there's concerns raised, and I'm just wondering if members, well, certainly if it was a sticking point, this issue of the lease, whether it's worth, if members wanted to delegate the matter to officers in consultation with the chairman and ward member to secure an updated management plan for condition 18, which obviously will provide the updated details of the lease, So as a potential solution maybe for members.
Yes, that's a possibility. We'll explore that. But in the meantime, I think Councillor Davis, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. Going back and looking at these sort of things, why do you cremate somebody? Because you think a lot of them, and you've got the ashes. So you bury them in a graveyard. You know they're going to be left there forever, no matter what happens to them. Or do you take them and spread them on the hill or the pond or wherever you want to be spread? But if you put them in that cemetery, you won't be able to find them unless there's a plaque on them. If they all got plaques on, you can't do anything with the field after. They belong to they would have to know that those plaques are going to be there forever, like they are in the graveyard. People do the family tree. Where the people it's all going to be underground, they wonder where they are. So it's very suspicious that we've got to have a building for that sort of thing. It's unusual, let me say, for the building. And we were surprised how many people want burying in coffins. And how many people buy a plot and then they want the one next to them for their family. We're getting short of room at Bickerton, so we decided to do something with the cremated remains. We've had a few cremations, and there's only actually one gone in the plot where we're putting them. So there isn't a big take-up. It's a good 99 years lease. It's a long time. It keeps tidy, something that people aren't using very much. And I would move we don't give it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Davis. Are there any further speakers wish to debate on this one? Councillor Bratt? No. No further speakers? Well, we have to move on with it somehow. Yes, Councillor Flavelle.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to comment on something Councillor Davies said, I mean, there is a market for people wanting this. You know, not everybody wants to have those, you know, would worry about those sorts of things. I mean, I from a personal point of view, both my parents are in a natural burial ground and there are no stones and there are no markers at all. And it's completely open, it's very wild, it's in a wood. And, you know, the people who choose that wouldn't want that. So it's not, we're not saying that this is going to become the norm and everybody has to use it. It's an option for people who want that sort of burial and want that sort of natural look. So you know, I do think there's a need for it and a market for it, and a choice that we ought to be offering people. Now, at the end of what Councillor Davis said, he did say he wanted to move to refuse. So can we clarify whether that is actually a proposal? Because I'm happy to move the opposing proposal that we accept with the conditions on the lease, if we can get those conditions on extending the lease.
Well, right.
So I just wanted clarification on whether Councillor Davis's was an actual proposal, because he did say I move refusal.
We'll go back to Councillor Davis, and if the case is that it's moving refusal, we do have a seconder that's flashed up on the chat box there. Councillor Gage would second the refusal. So in all fairness, we'll have to go back to Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis, can you hear me, and yes, can you clarify the position?
I move refusal to allow it.
You move a refusal, yes, basically that's what it is, a refusal of the application, right?
Yeah.
And Councillor Gage?
Yep, happy to second refusal on the grounds of that building in the Green Gap.
Right, so it's been proposed for a refusal and seconded by Councillor Gage. Are there any further speakers before we go to a vote on that, or would you like to vote on? Councillor Marin, I see you're in the chat box at exactly the same time as Councillor Gage flagged up his seconding of refusal. So would you like to speak now, Councillor Marin?
Procedurally, I think we'll need to move on with the refusal vote. I was simply going to say, well, we'll see how that goes on.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, if Councillor Davis's proposal doesn't move, I think we are worthy of further discussion that
that's right.
The officer made.
Yeah, that's right. Now we've got Councillor Bratherton to speak, and then I think we'll go to a vote unless anyone else wishes to speak before we do go to a vote. Councillor Bratherton.
Chairman, I'll hang fire until Councillor Davis's suggestion has been moved. I can't vote anyway because I've been locked out of the meeting for too long, apparently. So I just wanted to put my 2 pence in as someone who works in the industry and clear up some of the mythologies that are flying around.
Well, yes, that's been very useful. Right, so it looks as though we can go to a vote at this stage on a refusal of the application proposed by Councillor Davis and seconded by Councillor Gage. So let me just get to the list of voters, committee members. So, right, so this is what you're voting for, a refusal of the application here. So you're either for that refusal, against that refusal, or not voting. We'll start with Councillor Susie Smith.
Chairman.
So hang on, yes, Daniel, before the vote. Yeah.
Can I just make sure, just confirm that the refusal is based on the harm from the building on the Green Gap? So that's what's.
Yes. Yes. Sorry about that. Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah. Right.
Councillor Gage made that a little bit more clear when he came in. Yes. So it's on the building within the Green Gap area on this site. Right. Councillor Smith, your vote, please.
Yeah, for, Chair.
For refusal, right. Councillor Mike Benson.
For refusal.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bratherton, you say you couldn't, you weren't present in all the debates, so that precludes you from voting on this. So we'll move to Councillor Butterill.
For.
For refusal.
For refusal.
Yeah, well, that's all right. I'm just making it absolutely clear. Councillor Davis.
For refusal.
Right. Councillor Flavel.
Against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Gage.
For refusal.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Maron.
I'm not going to vote.
Right.
On the basis I would have voted for it if there'd have been no building. But there is building, so I'm not.
Yeah, I understand that. You made that clear in the debate. Yeah. Councillor Murphy?
Against.
You're against refusal. Councillor Rhodes?
Against refusal.
You're against refusal. Councillor Laura Smith?
Apologies, Chair. I won't be voting. I missed part of the debate.
Right, and my vote, well, I'm not voting on this one. So over to Helen now. It looks as though refusal's been voted on. Helen, are you with us?
Thank you. Yes.
The numbers.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got 5 for refusal, 3 against refusal, and 4 abstentions. So it's carried.
So that's carried. Refusal on that one is carried. So there we go. Right.
Chairman, can I just ask? I'm
Yes.
presuming, Helen, I am one of those that is in your list of abstains, is it?
Yes, because
strictly speaking, I didn't abstain. I was told I could not vote.
Yeah, because you missed part of the debate, part of the item. So
on public record, that will show me as abstaining, which is not what I wanted to do. I've been forced not to be able to vote because of the system we're having to use that isn't foolproof.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I marked it down as not voting because you did say that you'd lost connection part way through, and
Yeah, I know what I said, Chairman, and I was told by our legal officer that I couldn't vote.
Oh,
but
right, sorry.
I want
I was
that point making
I was
in the
unaware of
minutes
that.
that I did not abstain. I was unable to vote.
Yeah, so you're down as not voting. Well, Helen,
Excuse me, Chair. I think we should take the vote again for clarity.
all right, if that's the, yeah. So, yes, Councillor Councillor Bratherton's not happy with the voting procedure there, so we'll carry on and go through that again, members, just to be absolutely correct, as per our legal officer's advice under the circumstances. Right, so we'll start again on that. Councillor Susie Ackers-Smith, are you for refusal or against refusal or not voting?
For refusal, Chair.
For refusal, as per last time. Councillor Benson?
For refusal.
As per last time. Councillor Bratherton?
Unable to vote.
Unable, right, or yeah. Councillor Butterill?
For.
For refusal. Councillor Stan Davis?
For refusal.
Councillor Catherine Fraval?
Against.
Yeah. Councillor Alan Gage?
For refusal.
Councillor David Marin?
Abstain for the reason I gave last time.
Yeah. Councillor Dennis Murphy?
Against.
Yeah. Councillor Jill Rhodes?
Against.
Councillor Laura Smith?
Abstain.
Right. And my vote is I don't wish to vote on this one. Not voting. So over to you again, Helen. Does that change anything?
No, it's still carried. It's 5-3 with 2 not voting. Oh, sorry, 2 abstentions, you're not voting, and 1 unable to vote.
Right. Okay. So that application is refused. I had another little message popped up on the screen. One of our members would like to have a short. When are we planning to have a break for lunch? She's saying. Well, we could have a short break if members wish. We'll have a short break then. Would any suggestions for how long that would be? No? 20 minutes would be all right with it?
Do you want to come back at 2:15? 2:15? Or
Yes.
is that too long?
Well, we've got 15. Well, somebody suggested, the first suggestion that's come up is 15 minutes. So, well, we could make it. Well, let's get back at 2:10. Should we say that? And it's a compromise between the 15 and the 20 or something like that, isn't it? Well, it's a bit of a compromise. So 15 minutes. So then we'll say 2:10.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's 2:10, Chairman.
Okay, it is 2:10. So, members, we can continue if you wish. Well, we will continue. Just let me get the camera switched on. Right, so we're back from the break now. It's exactly 2:10. So we can move to the fourth application, which is 20/4803N, former Printworks site, land at Crewe Road, Haslington. So we'll have to go straight, well, we won't have to, but we are going straight to Daniel Evans to introduce this report to us. Daniel, are you with us? Good, thank you.
Yes.
Good,
Thank you,
right, over to you, Daniel.
Oops, just 2 seconds.
Oh, sure. Yes.
I'm not
Sorry.
sure.
Sorry, I should have asked as everyone here first before
right.
that introduction. Yeah. Beg your pardon. So I'll run through the roll call quickly. So you go off screen, Daniel, and off microphone for the time being, and we'll just go through the roll call. Better get this right, hadn't we? Councillor Susie Ackers-Smith.
Here, Chair.
Present, right. Councillor Mike Benson.
Present, Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Joy Bratherton.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Penny Butterill.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Stan Davis.
I'm here.
Good, thank you. Councillor Catherine Flavel.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Alan Gage.
Present, Chair.
Councillor David Marin.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis Murphy.
Present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Rhodes.
Present.
Councillor Laura Smith.
She's made reference in the chat. She said she's made a comment, Chairman.
Yes, she says she has to leave. Right. So that's it. So over to you, Dan, to introduce it now. We've done the roll call. Councillor Laura Smith isn't with us on this, so go ahead.
Okay. So this site is a site which has got planning permission for a residential development of I think 14 houses, and they basically now want to amend the scheme. So you could see the sorry, it's the 11 houses. So you can see the application site is this area of land in here. So it's quite a linear parcel of land. There's a large residential development directly to the south, just off Crewe Road, Haslington. And there's the location plan. So you can see there's a existing dwelling next door. And this is a forward Printworks, which I think has now been demolished. And this is the proposed site layout. So you can see the houses are arranged around a single linear cul-de-sac into the site, and you can see how the dwellings are arranged around that access. And this is the approved scheme. So this was approved in 2018, I think it was, and you can see how the slight variation mainly in this end of the site. You can see how it's slightly altered in there. So these are the elevations. So you can see page 52 sets out all of the changes, some fenestration, elevational changes, and these are the house types. And these are the photographs. So this is the site here on the right hand side of Crewe Road. That's the next door house to 204 Crewe Road, which I pointed out on the plan. And this is the entrance to the Bovis site, which is the large housing development which wraps around the back. This is looking towards the Bovis development through the site, so you can just make out some of the new recently constructed houses. This is inside the site to the eastern boundary. That's looking towards the development on the Bovis site. That's looking back towards Crewe Road. And that's looking towards the opposite side of, so that's looking to the east. That's 212 Crewe Road. Okay. So, just get back to the site plan. So in terms of the main issues, was outline consent for 14 dwellings originally, and they've now applied for the variation of the approved plans on the reserve matters for this scheme of 11 units. Design changes are relatively limited and in some ways do actually improve the appearance of the development. There's not considered to be any additional impact on trees. There was 2 trees lost as part of the outline consent, which will be replaced, and I think on the landscape plan there in this area here. And then there's no highways objections. Residential amenity and ecology implications are acceptable, and it's recommended as per pages 58 and 59, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll now move to public speakers. And the first one is the Ward Councillor Stephen Edgar. And you have 5 minutes, Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As has been mentioned, the reserve matter application was granted in 2019. All this application is doing is varying an already agreed plan. I do support the idea that the affordable housing on site is designated for local people and that all the houses will be fitted with electric charging points. The appearance of plots 1 to 3 looking from Crewe Road have been improved by staggering their frontages. But I'd like to point out that the kitchens are also at the front of these houses, and no doubt the residents will want to put their waste bins there as well for convenience. Please, to ensure that the unsightly bins are not seen, would it be possible to put a screening wall or fencing in front of the houses to hide the bins? It seems a little bit odd that the access to plot 2 is below the bedroom for plot 1. Is this an inconsistency or is it normal? I support the proposal and just ask for clarity on the 2 items that I've mentioned. I have had a request from the Parish Council that the new road be named after a World War casualty, Wilmot Luscott, who died in Gaza in 1917 and was buried in Israel. I would also request that the developer consider liaising with Answer Environmental to install a public waste bin on the corner of the site. This stretch of road has no waste facilities currently. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, there may be questions from members. Members, questions? Any questions? Alan, Councillor Gage, you have a question for...
Thanks, Councillor Edwards. Sorry, you were mentioning about some screening there on the area of bins. I just didn't quite pick up where on the map you were referring to. It just didn't.
If you look at the plans, the first 3 houses are in a staggered terrace.
Yes.
And the middle house will only have access for anywhere, in particular to put their bins at the back, going through the alleyway. But the kitchens for all the properties are at the front of the houses. And it would be, well, people would want to put their bins where they're going to be creating rubbish potentially. If the bins are just stacked at the front of the house, it spoils the appearance, in my opinion, and a fence or brickwork or something should be installed to hide the bins, please.
Okay, no, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, members? No, there doesn't appear to be nothing showing up. So we'll go back to the planning officer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edgar. Thank you. We'll go back to Daniel Evans for any response to what he's heard there from the public speaker. Well, not the public speaker, the councillor, the ward member.
Yeah, I think in terms of plots 1 to 3, so each plot will have rear garden access for those plots. I'm just trying to check the plan in the presentation. Just bear with me, just to see if I can make out where it's not going to be. It looks to be like the kitchen has not actually changed location. I'll share the screen, just 2 seconds. So if you make out on this plan, this was the original approved scheme, and comparing it to the plan in the key plans pack, I can make out that the position of the settees, I suppose, that are in those locations at the back, and then you could see make out a U-shaped section there, which is the kitchen cabinets. So the kitchens have always been located at the front of the dwelling. And I don't think we ever attached a condition about bin storage previously. At the end of the day, going back to what's currently proposed, plot 1 will be able to access around the side, plot 3 is able to access around the side, and then plot 2 there's a covered walkway between underneath the dwelling. Between plots 1 and 2 at ground floor level, which they will be able to provide access to the rear. So each of the 3 plots has got rear garden access. So I'm not sure it's that relevant, given we're only considering some quite minor changes to fenestration and the detailing on those plots. The main layout changes are largely to the bottom end of the site.
Okay, is that it? Thank you.
Yep.
Good. Okay. Any further questions from councillors? No, there doesn't appear to be. We can move to the debate now. Which councillor is nearest to this, or ward councillor who wishes to open the debate? Must be one there. Councillor Marin.
I'm probably possibly the nearest ward councillor, although that could be arguable, I suppose.
I
don't have a great deal to say about this. I will be supporting the recommendation. I am sympathetic to the request to have a litter bin within the cul-de-sac. Otherwise councillors may well be asking for a litter bin and be told to it will go on a list and you might get one in 2 years' time. So I don't know why this shouldn't be provided by the developer. I can't quite recall what was said about the wall to screen the bins, but where waste bins are at the front of a property, they are unsightly, and do drag down property values. So if that is the case, if they are at the front, I would support a screening of those bins, and maybe that could be added on as a condition. I don't know. I think Dan said that it might not. I can't recall what he said about that. On the basis that this is just a variation of condition. Maybe it's something that's been missed. So yes, I'm happy to approve the recommendation, but I would like consideration to be given to the litter bin, which I thought ought to be standard practice for developments from now on, as well as the screening of the main bins. That's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Rhodes. Well, we can go back to Councillor Evans actually, but Councillor Rhodes has a question for you as well. So we'll let Councillor Rhodes in first, and you can answer Councillor Marin and Councillor Rhodes at the same time, perhaps. Councillor Rhodes, thank you.
I noticed there's been a change to the original design around plots 7 and 8. Plot 8 was much further forward on the original design, and that's I'm asking the question about you've got principal rooms opposite each other, both at 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. Is there going to be some screening of some description? Because it doesn't look to me like there's enough distance between those principal windows. And I know previously you said that the windows those sites would be blank. But on the plans, I can't actually see where the windows would be.
Right, thank you. We'll go to the planning officer for his responses to those queries. Dan,
Yep.
if you're in a position.
I'm just going to get the scale of plan so I can give you the actual distances we've got. So you're concerned about 7 and 10 and 8 and 9, is that right?
7 and 8 and 9 and 10.
Oh, so you're about the side boundaries, or
Yeah, that's right. It depends what separation there is. If it's a fence, then you might get away with the principal windows. But if
No,
it's
I don't think there are any principal windows on those side elevations. Generally, how the dwellings are designed is your principal windows are facing forwards and backwards. So plots 8 and 9 are the same house type, and just looking at the elevations, at ground floor level, the front bit has got some openings, but they're kind of offset. And then there's no first floor windows. So yeah, I think in terms of the relationship, you've probably got about 2 meter gap between the two, and there doesn't seem to be any amenity issues that I could see in terms of a position of windows there.
I can see a window on the side of, I think it's 7, a small window, but it's difficult to tell off the plans.
So let me share the screen just to point out. So you're talking about plot 7, which is that one there, and there is shown to be on the side of plot 7 I should not put in the presentation. Plot 5, 4. I'll have to get it up on this separately. Just bear with me. So on the side elevation of plot 7, facing north, so towards plot 6, you've got a ground floor door and a first floor ensuite window. At ground floor level, you've got some secondary openings. So you've got 2 very narrow openings, one serving a lounge and one serving a lounge/snug. Both of those are very secondary minor windows because they're served. The lounge is served by a much larger bay window on the front, and the lounge/snug is served by a much bigger window and a large glazed open patio doors off the back. At first floor level, there's an ensuite. And then which other plot were you concerned about? Councillor Rose, which plot were you concerned about?
9 and 10, but I think they're probably both very similar in that one of the houses has got windows and the other one hasn't.
Yeah, so plot 7 and 10 are the same house type, it's just they're handed. 9 and 10, let's see if they're in the key plans. Nine has got a number of windows on its side elevation, but they're all facing the open space. On the side facing the dwelling on plot 7, I think it's just utility and an ensuite. Utility, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not, there isn't a huge amount of gap between them, but then in modern properties there aren't.
No, it's
but
standard.
there isn't any overlooking.
Yeah, it's pretty standard layout really, in terms of the spacing to the side boundaries.
Thank you.
Okay, and then in terms of Councillor Maron's points, plots 1, 2 and 3 have all got bin storage access to the rear. So although they we have got rear garden access, so each could provide each could store their bin at the rear. Clearly, if they chose to store it at the front, there's not much we can do. But we've provided a rear garden access for each of those plots, so they can store their bins out of the street scene.
Okay, I think that answers the questions.
Chair, there was just a question about provision of a litter bin.
Yes. Okay.
Can that be required?
It's a bit difficult, really, given we never asked for one on the outline consent. We never asked one on the reserve matters. Well, we should have asked one on the outline consent, and we didn't ask for one on the reserve matters consent. And they're all only seeking, as part of this application, to vary the approved plans. So what we should only be considering is those alterations, such as the changes to the position of some of the dwellings, the changes to the design of some of the dwellings. I think it's a bit unreasonable, even though it's only a very minor thing, to ask them to provide something additional. I wouldn't like to be in the position of, if they appealed a condition, then saying trying to defend it as an appeal to an inspector, when you're asked, why didn't you ask for one in the first place? I think, given the position where we are now, that they're just varying the reserve matters plans, I just don't think it's reasonable to ask for one at this stage.
Okay, I think Councillor Maron's indicated he understands, and thanks you for that. Any further questions? I don't see any, so we can move to the debate. Councillor Gage, would you like to open the debate?
Yes, Chair. It looks like a pretty good design of the estate. The variation kind of makes sense, or the changes make sense. I understand that we can't legally request the bin, but even informally, could we not pass on our wish to the developer? Otherwise, I'd be happy to propose this. I think it would also make sense to certainly to consider the parish council's request that it's named after that local war hero, Wilmot Lescott, as well. But I'm happy to propose that we approve this, and if we could informally ask the developer, because I'm sure they're quite a reasonable developer, if they would be happy to put a bin in at the front of the estate for us, and probably would even help with the sale of the houses too.
Daniel, what have you got to say about that? Is there anything we can?
I suppose we could always attach a condition, not a condition, an informative onto the decision notice, just to advise them that the committee would like the provision of a litter bin at the entrance to the site, and then it's left to them to see if they're willing to provide one.
Well, I'm sure they could. You know, it's not a big ask, is it? So
yeah.
Any reasonable developer would be quite happy to do
would have
that.
thought so. Look, I think the informative is the best route to go.
Yes,
go down.
yes, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay, so it's been. Are there any further councillors wish to add to the debate, or no? Because it's been proposed. and by Councillor Gage, and seconded in the chat listings by Councillor Benson. So if nobody else wishes to speak on it, we can move to the vote. Anyway, I must remind you again that you should only vote if you've heard the whole item, and if you've not, then you should abstain from voting. So now we'll go through the list of councillors to vote for approval of the application with the informative that Daniel Evans, the planning officer, has suggested, well, not suggested, he's going to put on, suggested by Councillor Marin. Right, so we'll start with Councillor Ackers-Smith.
For, Chair.
For, right, thank you. Councillor Mike Benson.
For, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Joy Bretherton.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Penny Butterill.
For, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stan Davis.
For.
For, thank you. Councillor Catherine Flavel.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Gage.
For.
Councillor David Marin.
For.
Councillor Dennis Murphy.
For.
Councillor Jill Rhodes.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Smith, I believe she's left the meeting, so there's not a vote there. And then my own vote, for. So over to you, Helen. It looks like it's unanimous.
It is. That's
For,
carried. For.
Carried. For approval. Right. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the fifth application, which is application number 20/3090C, United Utilities, Hassel Road, Alsager. Daniel, it's down to you again. You seem to be having to work hard at this session today.
Okay.
Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we've got this application, so you can see the location aerial photograph on the screen. So it's existing wastewater treatment works on the edge of Alsager off Hassel Road, so just next to the household recycling centre. And what we've got is an application for quite a number of works to the an installation of equipment and, I suppose, buildings at the wastewater treatment works. They largely are located within this parcel of the site, but there are two smaller parts within the main part of the existing site. And this coloured plan basically shows you what they're proposing. So you can see two additional buildings there, and then other structures and tanks and what have you around the site. That's the previously approved scheme. And these are some of the kiosks which are proposed. And again, they're very utilitarian in their appearance, given the use of the site. What you'd expect on a wastewater treatment site. These are some of the photos within the site. So this is the access and the development area. So this is coming in off the access. So development area is over here. That's within part of the site. And these are the photos, what you can see from outside the site, so along Hassel Road. So that's the access into the household waste recycling centre. That's the access into the United Utilities site. And then that's the existing screening. So there's quite decent screening along Hassel Road. You don't actually appreciate the site is there. So I'll just go back to the site plan. So in terms of the main issues, the principle of development in the countryside is acceptable. Basically, PG6 allows for essential work by public infrastructure and service authorities. So that's acceptable. There's the site's works are confined to the main part of the existing site and don't encroach into the wider open countryside. There's not going to be any amenity or highways issues. The ecology issues are considered to be acceptable within the officer report. On that basis, the application is recommended for approval, Chairman. So hopefully it's a relatively straightforward application. But yeah, you can see the recommendation in the report.
Yes, okay, thank you for that, Dan. We'll move to public speakers now, and we have the Ward Councillor, Councillor Phil Williams from Alsager. Councillor Williams, I saw you were there once or twice before. You ready to go?
Just bobbing back in occasionally to see.
That's all right. Nice to see you.
It was like you've had an interesting debate, an interesting morning and afternoon. So thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, officers, members and all who are attending this meeting. I'm here as a Cheshire East Ward member and Alsager Town Councillor, and I have one simple and direct appeal. It's certainly not to object to the application or in any way to attempt to overturn it, because the work of this essential facility has to be done. But it is to press for some more details on the planting to replace the section of hedgerow that will be removed, and indeed to press for some more mitigation for the loss of hedging and habitat. In a related application, 20/2540C, Cheshire East granted permission for United Utilities to remove 10 metres of mature hedgerow, despite concerns expressed by Alsager Town Council, which referred directly to policy NBE4 in the Alsager Neighbourhood Plan. This states that the removal of a mature hedgerow will not be supported unless any new planting and mitigation is accompanied by due care and maintenance. Now, in the light of that, I'm pleased to see that the revised plans for that application contain protective fencing and other measures to ensure that when the hedgerow is replaced, it will be allowed to grow, and I welcome that. Alsager Town Council made no comment in relation to this particular application before you today, but I'd like to crave your indulgence, if I may, and make some observations that I hope will help you in the deliberations this afternoon. As my colleague, Councillor Jane Smith, pointed out to full council recently, that a survey in Devon showed that just 10 metres of similar hedgerow was home to 235 different species. The biodiversity of our hedgerows is truly remarkable and a cherished feature of our landscape. The loss of thousands of miles of native hedgerow, particularly during the 1970s, has contributed to the fragmentation of wildlife habitats. And although the pace of hedgerow removal has slowed in recent years, we would need 300,000 kilometres or over 186,000 miles more hedgerow just to get back to where we were 60 years ago. So I'm pleased to note that there's hedgerow replanting included in the conditions for this application, and would expect there to be protective fencing and other measures as there is with the previous application. However, given the scale of habitat loss across the country as a whole and Cheshire East's declaration of a climate emergency in 2019, I would encourage the panel to consider further environmental mitigation to ensure that the site quickly recovers from the very necessary work being carried out by United Utilities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. There may be questions from members. Members, any questions for Councillor Williams? There doesn't appear to be, but I have one, just a bit of clarification. Your main concern is really the loss of hedgerow on this site.
That's correct.
Of the hedgerow, is it?
Yeah, protection. I know, as I say, I'm pleased to see in the previous application that there was fencing and a sign to sort of declare that the hedge is to be protected. There isn't a great deal of detail in the application as to what measures would be taken to protect any hedgerow that was planted in this case. So I'd like some clarification perhaps from one of the officers about the nature of that. And indeed, obviously, I'm pushing a little bit further, whether there could be any more hedgerow planted either here or perhaps somewhere else.
So you'd like to see a little bit more hedgerow and perhaps difficult to establish what it is you want there.
Yeah, well, yeah, both. I mean, yeah, a little bit more if possible. I'm pushing there, but I would like sort of assurance about the nature of what the replanting would consist of, how it would be done to ensure that the hedge does grow back firmly and thickly, as it were, that we aren't just left with a straggly little bit of vegetation in place of what's a mature hedge at the moment.
You'd like to see it come into a decent hedgerow at the end of the day, and conditions to ensure that, so to speak. Yeah, absolutely. I should try to get it in a bit of a sentence so that when the planning officer he'll be on next, he can consider that and see if he can think of what sort of a condition, if members wish to impose that, he could put on it. Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There doesn't appear to be any further questions as far as I can see. I think we'll go to the planning. Well, we've got Councillor Ackers-Smith on screen. Did you wish to answer a question, Councillor Ackers-Smith? No. Right. We'll go to Daniel Evans, Planning Officer, to respond to any issues raised by the public speaker.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think in terms of the main point of discussion really is about the biodiversity implications of this development. So that should be your very last plan in your key plans. You've got that plan, so it might be best if you could open to that page. This is the landscape and biodiversity proposals for the site. So this has been subject to discussions with the council's ecologists. So in terms of the areas of red, that's where vegetation is being removed in terms of tree cover within the site. So you can see there's a large blob towards the northern end of the site, and then two smaller areas, and then another hatched area as you come in off the access. But in comparison to that, you've got areas of the darker green area, which is proposed planting for trees and scrub. So you have got purely in a comparing the amount of space, it does seem to be at least like for like. And then you also, it's worth noting, clearly there are areas of grassland within the compound of the wastewater treatment works, and you can see the yellow area, which is the northern section of the site. So within that area, they are proposing to provide a grassland and wildflower enhancement area, which obviously there are differences. So hedgerows will provide for certain species, and then I suppose grassland and wildflower habitat will provide for others. So it's about, I suppose, swings and roundabouts in terms of what's being provided. We've got quite a detailed scheme within here of the tree and scrub planting, the feathered tree planting, the proposals for neutral grassland, and proposals for the wildflower meadow area. So that's been subject to consultation with the council's ecology team, and they acknowledge there's going to be a minor loss of biodiversity, but I suppose what you have to bear in mind is it's a relatively constrained site, and you have to balance that minor loss, which is acknowledged by the ecologist, against the benefits of providing improved wastewater treatment facilities for the town of Alsager and the surrounding area. So you've clearly got what's been proposed and put forward by the applicants on that plan there, and the ecologist refers to being a minor loss, but then obviously you've got the benefits from this development. It's not encroaching outside the main part of the site into the wider open countryside. So on that reason, we've recommended approval, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we can move to the open debate on this one now. Would any councillor wish to start the debate? I suppose you could say I'm the nearest to that particular one. I do know the site. I think it's a fairly straightforward application here, and the only possible points here would be to ensure that the hedgerow and landscaping are substantial, and perhaps we could put an informative on that, as we have on previous ones, to encourage the applicant to make sure that there's a substantial hedgerow replacement, that it's not just a straggly thin thing, as Councillor Williams was worried that it might be. So with that in mind, I mean, I'm quite happy to propose approval of this particular one. But it's still open to debate, so any further comments from councillors would be useful, or maybe useful. Councillor Rhodes.
I'm happy to second, Chairman. I think we've had a very full description of what's going on, and I think we've taken note of Councillor Williams' proposals. Thank you.
Yes, I think so, and I think if the planning officer could put an informative there in it to say that the committee would be, concerned to make sure that the hedgerows that are replaced are substantial rather than thin, straggly things. Okay.
Well, I think in terms of the hedgerow, I think in terms of a hedgerow planting, the section of hedgerow planting specified on the plan, and it does specify that it's 15 metres, I think, in length, the section, to plug that gap, and it's a native mix of hazel, hawthorn, holly, dog rose and blackthorn. Height of planting, they're going to be up to about a metre in height, which seems reasonable for in terms of the height of planting. Obviously they'll grow taller, but there is specification within the plan, and then there are other areas of shrub planting within the site, which includes a much wider range of species, including species such as crabapple and other rowan and other trees, which I suppose would provide fruits and berries for birds and what have you. So, yeah, I think there's adequate provision within the plan, in my view, anyway, Chairman.
Right. Yes, that sounds reasonable then. So unless there are further remarks or anyone wish to debate further, we could go to the vote. It's been proposed by myself and seconded by Councillor Rhodes, I think, for approval. So I think then we can actually go to the vote. And again, I suppose I better remind you that you should only vote if you've been able to listen to the whole item, and if you haven't, well, you have to abstain. Go to the vote now. This is for approval of the application as set out in the officer's report. First of all, we'll go to Councillor Susie Akers-Smith.
For, Chair.
For. Councillor Mike Benson.
For. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Joy Bratherton.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Penny Butterill.
For. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stan Davis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Catherine Flavel.
For.
Councillor Alan Gage.
For.
Councillor David Marin.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis Murphy.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Rhodes.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Smith. I understand she's left the meeting. She had to leave. So that remains. My vote will be for as well. Over to you, Helen. That sounds as though it's unanimous that application would be approved, but you'll have to tell us that officially.
It is. We've got Councillor Smith not voting, and the vote was then unanimous, carried.
Right, so that application is carried. Thank you, members, officers and members of the public for your attendance today. I think we've finished with the meeting, so we could close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chairman.
Chair.